All right. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple courts, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So he made a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned the tables. To those who sold doves, he said, "Get these out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a market." His disciples remembered that it is written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." The Jews then responded to him, "What sign can you show us to prove your authority to do all of this?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." So, if we really took a literal look at that passage, and I'm not encouraging that that's the only way to look at the passage, we discover something kind of interesting. First of all, the passage is generally uncomfortable for most people. It doesn't seem like good protocol to go in and do something so violent. And you don't even get a clear picture of if he drove everyone out, was he driving out even people who were doing what they thought was of God, doing it with kindness and devotion towards the sacrificial nature of their rituals? So you just get this sweeping zeal that Jesus wants all of that cleared out. But I think what's could be missed if you're going to look at it literally, and we're looking at this today, is that afterwards you get this really interesting statement. The statement right after that, right after he does this hugely aggressive action, you get this response. The Jews then responded to him. What sign can you show us to prove your authority to do all of this? There had to have been something about this presence that gave them pause. Because I would think normally, if you had any human being go into a marketplace and start violently pushing everybody out and yelling at them to get out and doing it in the name of God, that most likely authorities would just simply be called and the person would be hauled away. That would be the normal thing, because you'd see that person as a threat to you. And you would see them as doing something very, very wrong. And what happens here, and again, we're looking at this literally, what happens here is that it doesn't say the scribes, it doesn't say the Pharisees, it just simply says the Jews responded to him. What sign can you show us to prove your authority to do all of this? So they're actually opening up to the possibility that Jesus has some authority. And they're asking for something that would be quite natural. What's a sign? Because there isn't anything about you. You don't have any status in our religion, in our church. So you can't, you're not wearing robes that say you have the authority to come in. So we need something like a sign to tell us. But the very fact that they're asking the question, the very fact that they've paused from any reaction, whether it be fear, whether it be response of aggression, says there had to have been something about that presence. There had to have been something about that presence. And they're responding to the presence. And then to answer that, because Jesus knows they're responding to the presence, Jesus says, destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days. Now, of course, they think that he's referring to the temple they're standing in that took, they said, 46 years to build. But Jesus was referring to himself. So herein we have a very provocative invitation along our spiritual path. And it's got a manifold invitation that I'm going to lay out to you today. At the first is the invitation to truly surrender into the divinity of our being. And then the second is to be willing to surrender to the desires that come from that surrender to the divinity of our being. So, zeal for your house consumed me. That was coming from a very aligned moment between Jesus and God. And I think that even in our spiritual paths, we have a certain amount of enculturation that takes place. We play within the system to a certain degree. We play within the system, meaning that oftentimes when we are emerging in our divine essence, in our divine call, we will fit ourselves in our situations, whether it's groups of friends, religious communities. We find a way to temper how we show up. And Jesus is giving an example here of not tempering at all. And part of surrendering to our divinity is a willingness to let go of our limited ways we discern. We don't let go of discernment because there's a place and a time for everything. I would imagine that if Jesus wasn't consumed with zeal for God's house at a moment and just wanted to do what he did because it was wrong, so he was going by his discernment that wasn't aligned to a spirit-filled moment, there's a very good chance he would have had a different outcome and been arrested. But he was in alignment with spirit. What we're called to, I believe Jesus said, in surrendering into the light of ourselves is to let go of all the ways we let enculturation really influence our discernment. And this is influenced by a lot of normal things: a desire not to disturb the waters, a desire to keep doing good and not get banned, a desire to navigate things in a way that doesn't lead us to rejection, a desire to find a way to make sure things progress with harmony. There's myriads of layers that influence our discernment. So we've got the first step of the invitation to surrender to the divinity of our being. And the second, to surrender to the desires that arise from the divinity and the discernment that falls short of what the moment calls. So our work today, if you will, that we're going to use a mantra for, is starting with, you could totally just surrender to the divinity of your being in this mantra, but include in that a healing for all the ways that you and you do it for yourself, I'll do it for myself. Let our discernment be influenced by motivations that are not aligned with our divine essential nature. What if you were so consumed with zeal that you were called to speak a word that you knew wouldn't be accepted in an environment you're navigating? Would you maybe hesitate and think of what would happen if I did that? Would everything be okay if I did that? Would I lose my friends? Would I lose my community? Would I lose my partner? You see, this is part of what surrendering to the light of our being ends up asking of us. is a true surrender of all the little shades and veils that we allow to still exist to keep us from the raw, wild, essential nature of being the divine light. Very powerful invitation. So in order to awaken us into that, I am going to introduce to you a new mantra. It's a super simple one. It's Om Svayam Agurutva. Om Svayam Agurutva. Om Svayam Agurutva. And the meaning is the lightness of is my true self. Lightness is my true self. So there are many, many great mantras. And we're going to chant it like this. Om Svayam Agurutva. So Rutva. Om Svayam Agurutva. Om Svayam Agurutva. We're surrendering into that part of ourselves that can free us from the limitations that we set up. We're surrendering into the part of ourselves that is divine light. So in our path, we discover ways we're divine light, and we have this natural desire to bring it out to the world, to express it. Part of embodying that divine light, part of the surrender into that, is the illumination in the freedom of how we express it. See, it's not all on our shoulders to figure out, okay, I'm experiencing this wonderful illumination I want to share with all. It's not all on our shoulders to figure out, how do I do that? How do I do that? The more we surrender into this, and surrender even into the desire and the discernment qualities of it, the more the light itself takes care of the how, takes care of the freedom needed, takes care of the courage needed, restores the innocence and the joy. One of the reasons that I know most of you have read my new book, Miracles on the Naked Light. One of the reasons I was able to do that project was because, at least in that time period in my life, I was so innocent, and I didn't have any reservation to showing up in the world simply as light and speaking freely from that. And you get the responses from that are overwhelmingly positive. You get the negative too, which would happen. Because I'm sure when Jesus went through the temple, there were some people plotting, as well as some people who were looking at it that maybe this is something maybe this is someone we need to learn from. You know, he probably got the positive and the negative when he did that. That's what happens in our lives. But the light within us is intended to be fully all-encompassing, fully expressing. So we're going to open up that light can heal any ways we lay up limitations. And part of the belief, whether you truly believe it or not, is lightness is my true self. So maybe you believe it in part. Maybe you want to believe it all. Maybe you do believe it all. Wherever you are in the spectrum, surrender into the work of the mantra. So I invite you to close your eyes. And it is light that vibrates in your body as your body. The cells, the organs, the muscles, the fascia, the bones, the blood system, the nervous system, the immune system, everything on the simplest level is vibrating light. Therefore, your even being here is because you are already vibrating life-giving light. So we step in with a surrender today. Lightness, lightness is my true self. Lightness is my true self. Inviting in a breath and releasing. Inviting in a breath and releasing. Inviting in a breath. And we continue with our mantra. Om Svayam Agurutva. 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 Om Svayam. 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 Agurutva. Allow the light of your being to wash and refresh the places within you that still carry fear, that results in navigating your life with pretense. Pretense meaning a little step before the tense, when we surrender into the light of our being. We are free of this pretense, free of this pretense. We restore our innocence. We end with this poem coming from the Chopra Center. Lightness is my true self, is whispered in mantra of a meditative stance. I ground, radiating the thought with every breath, in moment that unfolds with peacefulness and wisdom. Lightness is my true self, is echoed to align and ground with nature. And what a grand carousel I ride, purging that which is heavy, moving to Om, my way in harmony, below rainbow skies. Lightness of my true self reverberates in mind and body, a tool for peace that anchors day, for miracles to blossom. When you're ready, bring your palms together in front of your heart and open your eyes with Namaste. Namaste. Have a wonderful day.